It feels intuitive sometimes that if the learning feels a little bit behind, then the way to compensate for that is to increase the academic supports. Let's get them additional tutors and coaches, and let's do repetition and practice when they get home from school. But that really can backfire very quickly.
We know parents are very worried about their children falling behind academically due to the disruptions and challenges of the pandemic. We will take a real and honest look at why these concerns are valid and what we can do to help our kids get back on track so learning is once again viable. Welcome. I'm Amy O, the founder and executive director of CATCH, Community Action Together for Children's Health, based in Chicago's northern suburbs.
And I'm Dr. Lisa. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and as a CATCH board member, I am the liaison between CATCH and the mental health providers in our community.
Together, we are the hosts of Parenting the Mental Health Generation, a place where we discuss the topics that concern us as loved ones of young people struggling with their mental health.
Today, we're speaking with Becky Parkinson, who's a licensed social worker currently working at St. Andrew's School in Chicago after spending 9 years in the Northbrook public schools as a teacher and a social worker. So put in your earbuds, take this half an hour for you, and join our conversation with Becky. Thank you so much for joining us today, Becky. I know we're talking about a very popular subject, academic regression and learning loss and what that means for our kids. And we're really excited to have somebody with boots on the ground sharing your thoughts and your observations with us. I know as a neuropsychologist in private practice, this is a question that is coming up a ton for me right now with parents and families. I'm very concerned about what the past 2 years has done to their kids in terms of their reading development and math development, skills that maybe they should have at this grade level that they don't have yet. I'm wondering if you're seeing parents concerned with the same thing.
I am. So the population I work with is preschool through 8th grade, and I think across the board, parents are feeling concerned and they're feeling stressed, and it's been really hard for the last 2 years. I think there's kind of this tendency to think about what expectations were before. That is what we know. That's what we're comfortable with. And now maybe we're not meeting those expectations, but also that world we knew before doesn't really exist. And I know that's hard to come to terms with, and that's a grieving process. So yes, I think parents are stressed about it and worried about what happens next and how their kids are doing.
The tricky part about that is even when we can get to a point where we say, okay, the expectations we had 2 years ago maybe don't hold anymore. It's hard to figure out what are the new expectations that we should have and how much should we be focusing on academics and how much does that not really matter right now anymore. And it's hard to find a new ground to stand on there.
And I see that a lot, working in a school, also with teachers and administrators too. I think we're kind of all in it together, that we're all trying to figure out what are those new expectations. And I think everyone's just trying to take it a day at a time and celebrate the successes and the learning that is happening as we try to figure out kind of what this new normal is and what the new goals and expectations are for students.
I spent some years in the first grade classroom, and I'm also a parent of a couple kids. And the isolation and the challenges of learning during a pandemic came on the heels of what has been sort of an increase in expectation academically anyway in our classroom. The Common Core curriculum, et cetera, has pushed our kids beyond their developmental abilities already in many cases. And do you think that what we're worrying about as parents now is magnified by the fact that we were already kind of, trying to keep up developmentally with what we're expected of our kids? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think, and this is coming from someone that is not a parent yet, parenting is hard and scary. And I think, you're always kind of stressed and trying to figure out what is the new initiative or what's the new approach or where do we go next?
Or what my kid is supposed to be doing this week, next month, today. There's been so much focus on it. Whereas when my kids were in school 20 years ago in elementary school, we just didn't have those expectations academically. That Common Core push wasn't there.
Mm-hmm. Not only that, but there were actually things demanded of us during the pandemic that we could say definitively are not developmentally appropriate, like having a young child sit in front of a screen for hours on end, independently learning. We know for a fact that that's not developmentally appropriate, and yet suddenly that became a new expectation. And then we find ourselves worrying when our children can't meet that expectation that should never have been set for them in the first place. So it's an easy way to spiral out quickly, seeing things that we think suddenly are non-normative when we know that we just shouldn't have expected them to start with.
Well, you know, the other piece that I've heard from parents at Catch is they are actually watching their children learn for the first time and learn poorly in many ways, you know, or learn with a lot of what you just described, like fidgeting and inability to sit and concentrate. But they've never seen that because they're never at school.
And it manifests differently in school too, right? So like to be fidgeting as much while you're at school on the computer, that's not actually an accurate glimpse into what your child is like at school. So then it's raising their anxiety over it when really it's not a realistic picture.
I've heard a lot of questions from parents around, is this what the teachers have seen for years? And if so, why has nobody told me? And what should I be doing about it? It's actually become one of the most essential parts of my evaluation process, so that we can find out if we are talking about some of these behaviors in attention and distractibility and fidgeting and poor concentration. Is that a newer problem, or is that something that has been present over time well before COVID and perhaps is exacerbated by the current situations? Think about whether something is truly a neurodevelopmental issue or whether it is something that is more related to the demands that are currently being placed on them.
Are you seeing a big demand in families who want neurodiagnostics?
Yes, absolutely. But I know they're coming to you.
They are. We have not seen numbers like this, I mean, genuinely ever before. And I saw somebody posted something recently about how Google searches for, does my child have an attention disorder, or do I as an adult have ADHD, have gone up 50% in the past year or two since the pandemic started, because these behaviors, these characteristics, these concerns are now pretty much global. I think we're all experiencing a degree of mental fogginess and difficulty concentrating and not being able to manage our time effectively. And it can certainly feel and quickly feel like there is something wrong with us when it might actually be a really natural reaction to all the things we're having to deal with right now.
Becky, what about the students who were just cruising along? Typical learners. What are you seeing, in those kinds of students in your setting? And what kinds of things can we as educators, you as a social worker, we as parents do to assure ourselves and assure our kids that they're going to be able to get back on track academically?
What I'm seeing is students are happy to be at school and be with their peers and see their teacher. And you know, while school looks different now than it did pre-pandemic, I think they are there and available and ready to learn. Parents, I think what would help them is to know that their student needs to be in a place where they are emotionally available and feeling calm and ready to learn. So if they can put some things in place outside of the school day to help them to feel calm as they arrive at school, then they'll be there to accept the learning.
And I think it feels intuitive sometimes that if the learning feels a little bit behind, then the way to compensate for that is to increase the academic supports. Let's get them additional tutors and coaches, and let's do repetition and practice when they get home from school. But to your exact point there, Becky, that really can backfire very quickly. It has that opposite effect where we are not helping them feel calm and comfortable and have that safe space. We're not helping them recoup and re-energize and fill their battery. We are instead potentially draining them further or stressing them out, which is going to then have that opposite effect when they get back into the classroom the next day. And it's going to have them feel shut down or overly exhausted and less available for the learning that's then being offered to them.
So that begs the question, is it important in this conversation to distinguish between a student who may have been a typical learner before the challenges of the pandemic and a student who would have needed additional structures, an IEP, a 504, more scaffolding at school. It seems like it would be important to distinguish between those kinds of students when we move forward and how we can help them be good learners again.
I think it is essential in this conversation. I think we're going to be largely talking about that group of students who prior to COVID didn't really have any specific learning or attention needs that were going to make learning harder for them. And for those students, there is so much just about cognitive availability for learning. That is all that they're going to need in order to catch up and recoup and be successful. There is a segment of the population and of students in our schools who think differently, learn differently, process information differently. And that was the case prior to COVID. And then with the gaps in, being able to be available for in-school learning and receiving pull-out supports and other things that they would have needed, that gap has for some widened. And we know that they are going to require more direct instruction and more specific evidence-based programs in order to help recoup their learning.
So parents are concerned about their typical learners and their learning loss over this pandemic. What has gotten us to this point? Like, what about the way education has been during the pandemic has caused our kids to be unavailable for appropriate learning? And what can we do about those things? And why is it that a kid has to be so emotionally stable in order to be ready to learn, Becky? How did we get here in the last 2 years?
I will say, being in a school, I've seen a huge increase in the number of students that seek out working with me or coming to see me, parents sending me emails, and it's majority just feeling anxious, all this anxiety. I think students, no matter what the grade level they're in, they're feeling the stress that's just everyone is impacted by right now in the world, right? So even if the news isn't on in their home, like everyone feels it. We've changed over the last 2 years collectively, and there's this collective stress and this collective trauma that we're still navigating and figuring out together. And so I think students are feeling the anxiety that their parents have, the worries that they have at home, coming to school, and school does still look different. And there's so much uncertainty and so much change. They may be back on their basketball team or doing the activities that they enjoy, but it's different than it was 2 years ago, or maybe now they have to stay home for 10 days. There just is this constant change and flux. My teacher is absent now for the next 2 weeks and I have a substitute. We're very short staffed. So while I know that students are happy to be back and there are lots of wonderful things happening, there's just constant change going on. And I think for everyone, no matter how old you are, if you're an adult or a child, you feel that, and it's distracting, and you're not in that place always where you're ready to hear new material or to be challenged intellectually because you're concerned or confused, the routine is off, and you don't feel necessarily safe in that moment to be challenged academically.
How do we help our kids feel confident? How do we help them act resiliently, come to school in a place where learning can be number one again, instead of, I have a stomach ache, I can't sit here anymore, this is scary, I can't see your face, all the things that you're describing. What can we as parents do starting now and over the course of tomorrows to come to help our kids? I mean, it is scary. It's scary for me too, get back to a place of feeling like it's okay.
Yeah.
We talked right at the beginning about this idea of shifting our expectations. And I think that's a huge piece for helping our kids be available for learning too. Even when we are shifting our expectations, I don't think we always remember to pass that message along to them when maybe they're the ones that need to hear it the most. And so the idea of emphasizing effort over outcome and saying to them, I don't care what grade you get on the test or what your GPA is or how many AP classes you're signing up for next year. I want you to try hard and do your best and find things you love to do as well, and make sure you're balancing what we're talking about at school with what we're talking about out of school, all the things that we are starting to hopefully move to shift, we need to tell them that too and really give them the okay. I'm not just saying this, I actually mean it.
I think the biggest thing is modeling for your child how you're navigating it. Taking those moments, as hard as it is, kids need us to be strong, but they also need us to be soft. And I think to be vulnerable and share those moments where maybe you're feeling frustrated and give it a name and acknowledge it, and then show what you're doing to kind of cope and manage that. I think kids are constantly looking to us and learning from us. So I think that's a huge start and a huge first step. Obviously, talking about it and being open, that helps your child to feel seen and heard, to just sit with them and ask them how their day is going and what it is that they're feeling frustrated about, to just allow that space to be together. Really making a plan. I think in the moments where your child is feeling calm and regulated, to come up with a plan of what can we do in those moments where you're feeling really anxious. Maybe the plan at home looks slightly different than the plan at school, but in that moment where they're feeling good, that you can come up with, what is that plan? What will you have nearby? What's a tool that you need or a strategy that you can use? And then checking in with them, maybe after school that day, to see if that helped and if that worked for them. And obviously communicating with the school too. There are lots of people within the building that are there to support your child.
Sometimes I think it's counterintuitive for parents to sort of admit their imperfections, to admit their vulnerabilities, because they feel as though they need to be strong and I've got you. But what you're suggesting is that it's okay to say, yeah, I've been scared and nervous too. And we can get through this by doing these things, or we can get through this because we're strong and mighty, or whatever we say. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first you need to really validate it with your child and sit there with them with it. And then, know that you're a team and you're going to work on it together, and have that element of hope and a plan there.
Amy, I think what you're describing is necessary. I think we have to be vulnerable at times in front of our children, because otherwise, what precedent are we setting? But I mean, imagine the stress of feeling like my parent is perfect, and so I have to be perfect just like my parent. I mean, we want to show them our imperfections too, for exactly that reason. And that relieves them of guilt or shame when they make their own mistakes, and allows them to understand that is just part of being human.
I've recently been reading a lot about, just kind of that idea of self-compassion, and really practicing that with myself and with students too. Just that idea of really talking to yourself the way you would someone that you love, and know that, just like you said, Lisa, that, we're all human and we all make mistakes, and there isn't any perfection. And to just, talk to yourself with a calm, kind tone, and to just be gentle with ourselves and realize that, we're all navigating and figuring this out together.
One of the things I miss most about being in the classroom is coming home to the dinner table and telling all the funny stories of things that first graders said, or conversations that we had, and I'm wondering, is there joy in the classroom now? Is there joy in learning? Is it hard for kids when they can't see their teacher's face, when they can't see their friends' faces? How do we get back to that? School can be really fun and funny, and learning can be incredibly exciting. How do we get back there, even when we're in such a scary and uncomfortable time?
Luckily, I think we are still in that place, and we still have those moments, because kids are hilarious, right? Every moment they just, they do say the darndest things and the funniest things happen. I'll be very honest. I also think kids are really making fun of wearing masks. There's a lot of humorous situations that happen with that. They're sneezing, and then they need a new mask, and I can't actually tell. I didn't know that was you because I didn't recognize you. So I think there are definitely still those moments, because that's just who kids are. And I think schools are still very joyful. It just looks a little bit different, right? That the punchline of the joke is now centered around something else. But I think there still are those moments with kids.
I'm glad to hear that.
I was just talking to a school administrator who was talking to a parent who was concerned that their child was potentially sitting alone at the lunchroom. And the school administrator just had to laugh and say, all the kids are sitting alone at the lunchroom. They are literally 6 feet apart from each other in these wide, ridiculous tables, and nobody has a friend. Like you're not allowed to have a friend sitting next to you while you eat anymore. I mean, you have to laugh. I also am maintaining a lot of hope that when we get to a place where we can safely and comfortably let down some of our guards from a genuine safety standpoint, a lot of that will start to return on its own.
I also know one thing for me that's been really helpful to keep my ability to be resilient and positive is getting enough sleep. And I feel as though maybe if we encourage parents to make sure that even though routines are different, our kids got to come to school well rested with the intention of learning, even when it's different. Silver linings of challenge of over the last couple years. Can we spend a minute or two sharing what is hopeful and what our parents and kids might carry forward from this, even though it might be muddled right now?
Yeah, I think of, over the last 2 years, I've definitely found some silver linings in it and seen opportunities where students that maybe wouldn't have connected with each other actually did. They were more comfortable in the virtual format when they had that option. I definitely saw students explore like passions and interests that maybe they didn't have the time to dedicate to before, whether it was with their family when they were at home doing some remote learning, or if it was just with the classroom having to really show creativity to do lessons in a different format due to remote learning. I also think a huge silver lining is just that there's less stigma around talking about mental health. And, I see the great work you're doing with Catch. And I think collectively people are more open to talking about it because we're all going through it together. And that has been huge and has led to more empathy, more understanding. I'm hopeful people are giving each other more grace. So I think that's a huge silver lining as well.
And I think the other one that I would add is what I'm starting to see is a shift and such a necessary one in what we are emphasizing as being most important for our kids. And, no doubt we are raising children in high pressure, high achieving communities with very competitive schools. And there has been just this drive for quote success for so long that continues to perpetuate. And I think we're redefining success. And I have heard parents say to me, I never would have thought these types of words are coming out of my mouth, but I don't care what their grades are. I saw them laugh with their friends today, or I don't care exactly which, courses they sign up for next year. My kid got to school this morning without having a meltdown. And we are just starting to move the needle a little bit, I think, in understanding that there is so much more to raising these successful children than what it looks like from an academic standpoint.
I like ending on that note. I like challenging us all to think about how we can come out the other side of this and help our kids understand that, academics is important and learning is important, but what's really most important is getting through to the other side whole and confident and ready to go. And I think we've gotten some good tips here today about how we as parents and educators in the community can help our kids do that. So thank you, Becky and Lisa, for this conversation.
Okay, Becky, following in the footsteps of some of the other podcasters we listen to, like Brené Brown, we like to catch up with our guests by asking, what do you do to calm yourself when feeling escalated?
I go for a drive in complete silence.
No music blasting?
No, that's when I'm getting pumped up and feeling good about something. But when I just need to relax, it's no music.
What is the one message, Becky, you want everyone to know about mental health?
I think I'm going to answer this thinking through the lens of like being at a school. And, I started as a classroom teacher and then made the switch to social work and seeing the social emotional learning, the SEL lessons that are happening in schools. I remember when that really first started taking off, there was that feeling of it's just another thing on the plate. And I've really learned now by being in the social work world that it actually is the plate. And so that's just kind of how I look at mental health in general, that to me, it's the plate, it's the foundation, and we need to dedicate some time to taking care of it.
No, I love that so much.
Becky. Do too. I was fist bumping here and nobody could see it.
Becky, thank you so much for your time and your ongoing commitment to our community's mental health. We so appreciate having you here.
Thank you both. Thank you for everything you do.
We at Catch are all parents, and we too worry about the academic hits our children have taken as a result of the pandemic and its required pivots and ongoing challenges. We hope this discussion helped you to understand where we are collectively and what we can do to help our kids find their emotional footing so that learning and joy at school is once again viable.
Rebuilding our kids' emotional foundation is absolutely the first step to helping them catch up academically. We need them to feel calm and comfortable and confident. That is what we know is the only conducive way for their learning and their social emotional success. We also want them to develop the positive, growth-oriented mindset that they need in order to take risks, accept that they're going to make mistakes, and continue to try hard things.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Parenting the Mental Health Generation.
Stay current on all Catch programming by liking us on Facebook at Catch is Community or by visiting our website, catchiscommunity.org.
If you don't have your mental health, you don't have anything. There is a community of people out there that understands. Find it.